September 3, 2015 marked the 70th anniversary of victory of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War. To commemorate this grand occasion, China staged a military parade of impressive scale.
同志们、朋友们，70年前的今天，中国人民经过长达14年艰苦卓绝的斗争，取得了中国人民抗日战争的伟大胜利，宣告了世界反法西斯战争的完全胜利。和平的阳光再次普照大地。
The Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression was a struggle involving the entire Chinese nation. The Communist Party of China was the mainstay in this war. Japan's invasion of China had been long in the making. On September the 18th, 1831, a Japanese Kwantung Army unit on railway guarding duty bombed a section of track near Liuqiao Lake in northeast China, but blamed Chinese troops for the sabotage. Japan now had a pretext to attack the Chinese Army's Beidai-yin garrison and occupy the city of Shenyang. The September 18 incident had taken place, the precursor to events that would shock the whole world. Under its policy of first internal pacification, then external resistance, China's Kuomintang government then stepped up its encirclement and eradication campaign against the Red Army. General Zhang Suiliang, commander of the Northeast Army, was ordered to give up resistance and avoid confrontation. In the space of over 4 months, the Japanese militarists forcefully occupied more than 1 million square kilometers of Chinese territory, an area 3 times the size of Japan, inflicting extreme suffering on over 30 million Chinese civilians. It was down to the Communist Party of China to take the lead in fighting back against the Japanese. 3 days after the September 18 incident, the CPC's Central Committee issued a statement condemning the forced occupation of the 3 provinces of northeast China by Japanese imperialism. Soon after, party members including Zhou Baozhong and Zhao Yiman were sent to the area. By early 1933, guerrilla units directly commanded by the CPC were appearing, one after the other, becoming the main force fighting the Japanese there. The brave resistance put up by local people in northeast China marked the beginning of Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression, as well as the World Anti-Fascist War. Young Jingyu had been fighting against the invaders for 8 years when, on February 23, 1940, he was finally hunted down after a 40-day chase and killed in action. To find out what made Young such a resilient fighter, the Japanese carried out an autopsy on his body. In his stomach, they found nothing but undigested roots of grass, tree bark and cotton fiber. Kishitani Ryuichiro was police chief of the Japanese army. As one of Young's pursuers, he said with emotion, "China has steely soldiers like young Jingyu, and it would not fall." In May 1935, a film crew, under CPC auspices, recorded March of the Volunteers. With lyrics by Tian Han and music by Nie R, it was the theme song of the film Children of Troubled Times. The anthem, eulogizing heroism in defending the motherland, became a timeless masterpiece of patriotism. In 1935, the Japanese army stepped up its campaign of encroaching on and invading North China. The Chinese nation was pushed to the brink of annihilation. In December of the same year, the Central Committee of the CPC held an enlarged meeting at Huayabu in North Shanxi, stating explicitly that the overarching strategic mission of the party was to establish a broad anti-Japanese national united front. In reaction to the Kuomintang government's continuous compromise with Japan, students marched in the streets of Beiping, present-day Beijing, shouting the slogan, "Vast as North China is, there's no peaceful place for a single school desk." With the underground CPC organizations taking the lead, December 9, 1935, students in the capital mobilized against Japan. The December 9th movement they started soon spread nationwide. On December 4, 1936, Chiang Kai-shek traveled to Xi'an, intending to pressure generals Zhang Shuiliang and Yang Hucheng into joining his anti-communist campaign. Instead, on the morning of December 12th, the generals forcefully detained him. Through an open telegram, they issued an 8-point proposal that included a demand to end the Civil War, calling on all Chinese forces to unite and fight the Japanese. Putting the nation first, the CPC heeded the call. Zhou Enlai and other leaders flew to Xi'an to meet with Zhang Shuiliang and Yang Hucheng. After negotiations, Chiang Kai-shek gave in, promising an end to the persecution of communists and a joint effort to resist the Japanese. China's decade-long civil war, for the time being, was at an end. On July 7, 1937, the Japanese army bombarded the fortress of Wanping and attacked the Marco Polo Bridge on the outskirts of Beijing, launching an all-out invasion of China. The incident set in motion a full national struggle against Japan, which then became the Eastern Theater of the World Anti-Fascist War. In a public announcement, the CPC Central Committee called upon to build the solid Great Wall of the National United Front to defeat the infamous Japanese aggressors. On July 15th, Zhou Enlai handed Chiang Kai-shek a Communist Party of China's Central Committee Declaration of Cooperation between the KMT and CPC. On September 22nd, the KMT's Central News Agency published this declaration. The next day, Chiang Kai-shek gave an official speech that implicitly acknowledged the legitimacy of the CPC. A united front against Japanese aggression based on the second cooperation between the KMT and CPC was formally established. The CPC Central Committee held an enlarged meeting of its political bureau at Yuochuan in North Shanxi, approving a 10-point program for resisting Japan and saving the nation. This was a set of guidelines for total resistance against the Japanese invasion. In August 1937, the CPC Central Committee issued an order to reorganize the main force of the Red Army as the 8th Route Army of the National Revolutionary Army, and the CPC-led guerrilla forces in southern provinces as the new 4th Army. At the end of August, the 8th Route Army moved east across the Yellow River and towards the front line to fight alongside KMT troops. On September 25th, the 115th Division won its first battle at Pingxingguan, Shaanxi.
到了7点钟啊，天一光就打起来，这战斗力强中强，把他一打，牵来了1000多人。
The Battle of Pingxingguan was the Chinese Army's first major victory. It shattered the myth of Japanese invincibility and was a great boost to national morale. Following on, the 8th Route Army defeated the enemy at Yanmen Pass, Yangmingbu Airfield, and other locations. At the beginning, the KMT Army took center stage in the war. It fought the Japanese in the battles of Beiping-Tianjin, Shanghai, Xingkou, Suzhou, and Wuhan, and won the Battle of Tai-Er-Zhuang, shattering the Japanese Army's plan to crush China in 3 months. But because of the KMT government's passive strategy, its army kept losing fights, leaving vast areas of China's territory at the mercy of the Japanese imperialists. On December 13, 1937, the Japanese army captured Nanjing. Over 300,000 Chinese civilians and disarmed soldiers were brutally slaughtered. The Nanjing massacre was a crime against humanity and a dark moment in the history of the world. The Japanese army was now entering the heart of China, pushing the nation to the brink of annihilation. Whither China? This was the vexed question on many lips in this time of confusion. Rumors spread across the country, falsely prophesying imminent collapse and national subjugation at the hands of the Japanese. Will China be subjugated? The answer is no, she will not be subjugated, but will win final victory. Can China win quickly? The answer is no, she cannot win quickly, and the war of resistance will be a protracted war. Mao Zedong voiced these important conclusions in a speech titled On Protracted War, given on the seminar of the War of Resistance Against Japanese Aggression held in Yan'an between May 26th and June 3rd, 1938. Mao Zedong had written numerous works on military theory, including Problems of Strategy in Guerrilla War Against Japan and On Protracted War. He predicted that the War of Resistance would go through 3 stages: strategic defensive, strategic standoff, and strategic counteroffensive, emphasizing that the army and the people were the foundation of victory. His observations provided the public with a clear understanding of the development and outlook for the ongoing war. This, in turn, boosted morale and the will to fight. Mao's ideas were to provide the blueprint for China's national strategy. Home to the towering Baota Mountain and the mighty Yanghe River, Yan'an in North Shaanxi became the destination for countless individuals with lofty ideals and a beacon of hope in China's struggle for liberation. In October 1938, Guangzhou fell, and then Wuhan. The War of Resistance was entering its phase of strategic standoff. While the KMT Army was retreating from the front line, the 8th Route Army and new 4th Army headed towards occupied areas, where they fought behind enemy lines.
消极的防御是战争中一个刹车，当着敌人不备，我们必要进攻敌人。
我们每一个同志都至少要有3个老百姓的家，敲一下门，他就知道是谁。如果敌人来了，年轻的妇女呢能够就承认是她的丈夫，小孩呢就叫你叫爸爸。
From mountains to plains, the People's Army went behind enemy lines, forging a close bond with local people. As the guerrilla war progressed, the enemy's rear began to take center stage as the crucial battlefield of the war. On November 7, 1939, the 8th Route Army ambushed the enemy at Huang Tuling in Hebei province, killing the well-known Lieutenant General Norihide Abe, along with over 900 of his soldiers.
那是种上来的一块肥肉，我在近期念永贞司令那个地方建议打一仗，越搞就包围线越小了，就发现了。 他这个指挥所，我们就要他对着那个指挥所放炮弹，阿布就打伤了，6个钟头才死。
The Japanese, under their so-called boxing-in policy, ruthlessly isolated anti-Japanese base areas where they followed a 3-alls policy, meaning to kill all, loot all, and burn all. To break the enemy's grip, from August 1940 to January 1941, the 8th Route Army launched an unprecedented offensive in North China, mobilizing some 20,000 men.
105个团的时候，彭德怀同志，好，下面不要讲了，不管105、100多少，我们就叫北潭大战。
北潭大战呢，实际上开始是一个破袭作战。 是破坏敌人的交通，袭击敌人的驻点，
边界给它切断。每天晚上出去切入一段，这一段一个是15里地，分2个组，同时切断。
The 100 Regiment campaign including transport sabotage, stronghold raids and counter-mopping-up operations, scored a remarkable victory, prompting a Japanese congressman to comment with a sigh, "It's going to take us 100 years to destroy the CPC army." Now bogged down in a stalemate, the Japanese began to give more weight to political tactics over military ones in their dealings with the KMT. Chiang Kai-shek thus became yet more passive in strategy, stepping up his campaign against the CPC using infiltration tactics to inhibit the growth of the party. It was a maneuver that culminated in the infamous South Anhui incident. In January 1941, about 9,000 men of the new Fourth Army maneuvered north, following an order from the KMT military authorities, only to be ambushed by over 80,000 KMT soldiers. Most of the new Fourth Army troops were killed or captured. Ye Ting, the army commander, was detained during a negotiation, and Xiang Ying, deputy commander and political commissar, was killed. Chiang Kai-shek claimed that the new Fourth Army had rebelled, then announced he would remove its designation. The CPC, considering the wider picture and the interests of the nation as a whole, took a defensive stance and fought back politically. It announced it would re-establish the new Fourth Army, a move that put the Chiang Kai-shek administration in a rather isolated and awkward position. On May 25, 1942, in North China, members of a Japanese military death squad, disguised as Chinese military and political personnel, backed up by assault troops, raided the 8th Route Army's headquarters. With the enemy closing in, Zuo Chuan and the Deputy Chief of Staff urged Peng Dehuai to leave first. He led some men in a northward counterattack before he was killed by enemy bombardment. Zuo Chuan was the highest-ranking 8th Route Army officer killed in action in the war. When his sidearm was presented to Peng Dehuai, Peng delivered a long and emotional lament. Zuo Chuan left one family photo. His baby daughter was barely more than 3 months old when she last saw her father. In central China, the new Fourth Army carried out multiple counterstrikes against the mopping up, pacification, and gnawing away operations of the enemy.
3个5个人，我看你鬼子在哪里，我都瞄准阵地，都连上，都连下以后我就走了，啊，跟打游击战了。
On March the 18th, 1943, at Liu Laozhuang, the 4th Company of the 3rd Division of the new Fourth Army stood its ground to ensure the safe evacuation of Huaihai District Party officials and civilians. Its men fought the enemy from dawn till dusk until all of their ammunition was used up. Bai Se-zai, the company commander, then ordered his soldiers to keep fighting with their bayonets. In the end, all 82 of them died in battle. Villagers retrieved the fallen heroes' bodies using quilts from their homes and buried them together in a mass grave. The people of Liu Laozhuang then sent 82 young men to replace the martyrs, forming a new 4th Company, which has since then been known as the Liu Laozhuang Company. During the second half of 1941, the World Anti-Fascist War entered its critical phase. At the theatre of China, the Japanese army stepped up its lockdown and mopping up operations against areas of resistance. The suffering of locals was intensified by drought and plagues of locusts. To deal with crises and tide over difficulties, the CPC responded with 10 new policies aimed at streamlining the army organizations for simplified administration, providing unified leadership, reducing rents and interest rates, and launching large-scale area-wide production campaigns.
我就想2个办法，你们看哪个办法好？一个办法把这个改善了，大家回家，啊，还有个办法嘛，是自力更生，克服困难。
To eke out limited supplies, self-sufficiency was the order of the day. Trust in your own hands for adequate food and clothing. The people in Yan'an and other anti-Japanese base areas were exhorted. The 359th Brigade, led by Commander and Political Commissar Wang Jun, marched into Nanni-wan for a wasteland reclamation operation. Soon after, the once desolated Nanni-wan was transformed into a thriving land.
解决了普通改善生活的问题，解决了减轻人民政府和人民的负担问题。
Starting from 1941, the CPC carried out its rectification movement, fighting subjectivism in order to rectify the style of study, fighting sectarianism in order to rectify the work style of the party, and fighting formalism within the party in order to rectify the style of writing. The movement had a lasting influence in terms of Marxist education. It also played a major role in unifying the party ideologically, politically, and in action, and in winning the final victory of the war. In April 1945, the 7th National Congress of the CPC was held in Yangjialing, Yan'an. At the convention, Mao Zedong submitted a political report titled On Coalition Government. This was followed by Zhu De's report titled On the Battlefield in the Liberated Areas, Liu Shaoqi's On the Revision of the Party Constitution, and Zhou Enlai's On the United Front. The 7th National Congress put forth the CPC's political guidelines, which were to boldly mobilize the masses and expand the people's forces, and, under the leadership of the party, to defeat the Japanese aggressors, liberate the whole people and build a new democratic China. The Congress also established the 3 fine styles of work of the party, namely the style of work which essentially entails integrating theory with practice, forging close links with the masses and practicing self-criticism. A revised constitution of the CPC was approved, establishing Mao Zedong thought as the party's guiding philosophy. A new Central Committee was formed. Then, the first plenary session of the 7th Central Committee elected Mao Zedong, Zhu De, Liu Shaoqi, Zhou Enlai, and Ren Bixue to the Central Secretariat, with Mao Zedong as chairman of the Central Committee. Historically, the 7th National Congress of the CPC is remembered as an event of solidarity and victory. In the first half of 1945, the World Anti-Fascist War approached its victorious end. On August 9, 1945, the Soviet Red Army marched into northeast China to fight alongside the Chinese army and people. Chairman Mao issued a statement titled The Last Round with the Japanese Invaders, calling upon military and civilian forces in all anti-Japanese base areas to launch a full-on offensive against both Japanese and their collaborators. Vast areas of Chinese territory were liberated. Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression was the first total victory won by the Chinese people in modern history. At a cost of over 35 million casualties, as well as tremendous property loss, China steadily supported the World Anti-Fascist War at the Eastern Theatre. Victory in the war greatly accelerated the nation's awakening, improved China's standing in the international community, and won an eminent reputation for the country. In a war involving the entire nation, anti-Japanese forces led by the CPC fought a total of 125,000 battles and killed 1.741 million enemy soldiers, among whom 527,000 were Japanese, with the rest belonging to the collaborationist Chinese army. Thanks to the CPC, a total of 19 anti-Japanese democratic base areas were established. Nearly 1 million square kilometers of Chinese territory and a population of nearly 100 million were liberated. The People's Army grew considerably in size to include 1.32 million service members. So did the militia force, which, at the war's end, numbered 2.6 million members. During a grinding and brutal yet epic war, members of the Communist Party of China, leading the charge at the front line, were the last hope for the very survival of the Chinese nation. As stated by Mao Zedong in his report on coalition government at the 7th National Congress of the CPC, without the efforts of the Communist Party of China, without the Chinese Communists as the mainstay of the Chinese people, China can never achieve independence or liberation or industrialization and the modernization of her agriculture.
从长夜到日出，走过千山万水的路，每一步都是信仰足迹，烙印下新中国版图，从贫弱到富强，走出复兴，为业征途，每一天都有奋斗牺牲，只为人民拥抱幸福，凭着心中坚定信念，敢叫日月换新天，雄关漫道，风雨无阻，汇聚起中华儿女同向前。从贫弱到富强，走出复兴，为业征途，每一天都有奋斗牺牲。